The silence of Vatican breaks with a scream. The Pope falls from his horse in the middle of the street. A crowd surrounds the Holy Father. A midwife pushes through the mob, and then everyone sees the impossible. From under the papal robes crawls an infant, a living child, born from the Pope. But this is not just a scandal. This is the biggest secret of the Catholic Church, because this person ruled the Vatican for 2 years. She received cardinals, blessed armies, conducted Mass before thousands of believers, and nobody knew. Pope John VIII was a woman, the 9th century, Rome drowning in chaos, barbarians destroying cities, education vanishing, the Church holding a monopoly on knowledge, and women forbidden even to touch the Bible. Reading considered a sin, thinking considered heresy. But one girl decided to break every rule. Her name survived in legends, Joan of Mainz. If this story has already hooked you, hit that like button and share this video, because what happened next will change your understanding of the Middle Ages forever. This is not a fairy tale about a princess. This is the real story of a woman who fooled the most powerful institution in the world. Fumsti. Around 812 in the German city of Mainz, a baby girl was born. Her father was a missionary. Her mother died in childbirth. The child was named Joan, and from her first days her life was doomed to loneliness. Little girls in those times were considered burdens. They could not inherit property, could not study, existed only to bear sons for other men. But Joan's father was an unusual man. He secretly taught his daughter. They hid in the basement of their house. By candlelight she learned Latin, Greek language, Aristotle's philosophy. This was madness. If neighbors found out, the father would be accused of heresy. The daughter would be called a witch. Both would be burned alive in the town square. When Joan turned 12 years old, her father died from fever. She was left an orphan, without relatives, without money, without a future. Neighbors were already discussing who would get her as a servant, or worse. In the Middle Ages, a girl without a protector was easy prey. She could be sold, raped, killed without any consequences. Joan made a decision that changed history. She cut her long hair, stole men's clothing from the church vestry, smeared her face with coal to look older, and ran from the city at night. She decided to become what a woman could never be, a monk. Imagine this, a 12-year-old girl, alone on the road, around her forests where bandits hide, villages where any suspicious traveler could be killed on sight. She walks for several weeks, hungry, freezing, and finally reaches a monastery in Fulda, knocks on the heavy wooden gates, and says the phrase that saved her life. "I am the son of a missionary. Accept me as a novice." The monks believed her, because who could imagine a woman would dare such a thing? In the monastery, Joan received a new name, Brother Johannes. She wore a heavy black robe, shaved her head once a week so nobody would notice the hair grew differently, slept in a common cell with other novices, bathed, as monastery records say, only once a month, in complete darkness. She lived in constant terror of discovery. But Joan had an advantage: her mind. She read faster than everyone, memorized entire pages of scripture by heart, debated with the abbot about theology so well that he fumbled for answers. Within a year, she became the monastery's best student. Other monks grew jealous, whispered behind her back, but nobody dared say anything openly, because Brother Johannes knew the Bible better than all of them combined. But every month Joan lived through a nightmare: menstruation. In the Middle Ages, this was impossible to hide for long. There were no hygiene products, only rags that had to be washed in secret. She would wait for night, sneak to the well, wash away the traces of her body, and each time pray that nobody would wake up. In 835, the monastery's abbot received a letter from Rome. Pope Gregory IV was looking for educated monks to work in the Vatican library. Men who knew Greek and Latin were needed. The abbot chose his best student, Brother Johannes. Joan packed her belongings, trembling with fear and excitement. She was going to the heart of the Christian world, where the secret would be most dangerous. Rome of the 9th century was not the grand imperial city. It was ruins. Former palaces turned into stables. Aqueducts destroyed, streets covered in garbage. Between ancient columns lived beggars and thieves. But for Joan, this was paradise. Because here was the library, thousands of manuscripts, knowledge of the entire ancient world. She could read all day, and nobody interfered. Joan worked as a scribe in the papal chancery, copied decrees, translated letters from Greek, composed speeches for cardinals. Her handwriting was flawless, the logic of her arguments irrefutable. Soon she became an indispensable assistant to the papal secretary, a man named Anastasius. He trusted her more than his other advisors, not knowing he was trusting a woman. In 847, Pope Gregory died. The Vatican plunged into political bloodshed. Cardinals fought for power. Roman families hired mercenaries to put their candidate on the throne. The city burned. People were killed in the streets just for suspicion of supporting the wrong pretender. Joan hid in the library, waiting for the chaos to end. Finally, the cardinals chose a compromise. The new pope was Sergius II, an elderly man everyone considered a temporary figure. But Sergius proved smarter than expected. He saw the chaos in the Vatican, the corruption, the illiteracy of the clergy, and decided to implement reforms. For this, he needed someone he could trust. He chose Brother Johannes. Joan became the papal advisor. Now Joan had access to everything. She participated in cardinal meetings, read secret reports from all over Europe, drafted treaties with emperors. She knew which armies were preparing for war, which bishops were plotting against Rome, which kings wanted to divorce their wives. She was the most influential person in the Vatican, and still nobody knew she was a woman. In 855, Pope Sergius died of old age, and again the struggle began. But this time everything was different. The Romans were exhausted by wars. They wanted peace, stability, an educated leader, and someone proposed Brother Johannes, the man who knows the law, who can read and write, who served 2 popes. Joan tried to refuse. She knew that rising this high meant risking everything. But the cardinals insisted. Some genuinely believed in her abilities. Others simply wanted a weak pope they could manipulate. They thought Brother Johannes would be a puppet. They were wrong. In 855, Joan became Pope John VIII, the first and only woman on the throne of St. Peter. Joan ruled for 2 years. She conducted masses before thousands of believers, blessed armies, received ambassadors from kings, wrote bulls and decrees. Historical chronicles of that time mention Pope Joan as a wise and just ruler. He, as contemporaries wrote, cared for the poor, restored churches, punished corrupt bishops. Nobody suspected the truth, but Joan was human, and she felt lonely. For years, she had no close relationships, could not trust anyone, lived in constant tension. And then a new cardinal arrived at the Vatican. Young, educated. They began talking about philosophy, about books, about the world beyond church intrigues. Joan fell in love, and this became her fatal mistake. Joan became pregnant. Imagine this horror. You are the Pope, and you are carrying a child. She tried to hide it, wore wider robes, appeared in public less often, said she was ill, but you cannot deceive the body. The belly grew. Movements became awkward. Cardinals began whispering. Why has His Holiness changed so much? Why does he walk strangely? Why does he avoid official ceremonies? And then came the day that changed everything. Easter procession of 857. Pope John rides through Rome on horseback. Thousands of people line the streets. Suddenly the horse stumbles. Joan falls. A hard impact. And labor begins. Right there in the street. Before the crowd. A midwife pushes through the mob, lifts the papal robes, and sees the truth. Everyone sees the truth. First silence. Absolute silence. People do not believe their eyes. And then chaos erupts. Screams. Curses. Stones fly at Joan. Someone shouts witch. Someone heretic. Cardinals in panic. Guards do not know what to do. Arrest the Pope? Protector? Joan lies on the cobblestones, holds the newborn child. Blood soaks through the white robes. She knows this is the end. What happened next, historians still debate. Some sources say Joan was stoned to death right there in the street. Others say she was thrown in prison where she died from infection after childbirth. Still others claim she was secretly taken from Rome and exiled to a remote monastery where she lived to old age. We do not know the truth, because the Church destroyed all records. The Vatican acted quickly and ruthlessly. The name of John VIII was removed from all official lists of popes, his decrees annulled, documents signed by his hand burned. Artists received orders to destroy his portraits. Priests were forbidden to mention this name in sermons. The Church tried to erase Pope Joan from history as if she never existed, but you cannot kill a legend. The people remembered, whispered the story from ear to ear. Medieval chroniclers recorded the rumors. Martin Luther used the story of the Popes as an argument against the corruption of Rome. Writers created novels, artists painted pictures, and the Catholic Church continued to deny. The official position of the Vatican to this day: Pope Joan never existed. It is a myth, but there are strange details that make you wonder. In Rome, there exists a street where papal processions made an inexplicable detour. The Via Sacra. Right there, as legends say, Joan gave birth. Popes avoided this place for centuries. Why? There is also evidence of a strange ritual. When electing a new pope, they sat him on a special throne, with a hole in the middle. A cardinal would check with his hands and proclaim, "He has testicles. This is the pope." Absurd, or a way to never make that mistake again. The first mentions of the popes appear in the 13th century. Chronicler Martin of Poland records her story as fact. Giovanni Boccaccio includes her in his book about famous women. Hundreds of medieval manuscripts mention the woman Pope. Even official church documents of the 16th century acknowledge her existence. Only from the 17th century does the Vatican begin categorically denying. Several theories exist. First, Joan is a real historical figure and everything happened exactly as described in the legends. Second, the story is partially true, but details were exaggerated by later storytellers. Third, it is completely fictional, created by enemies of the Church to discredit it. Fourth, the most interesting: Joan existed, but was never pope. Perhaps she was an influential advisor whose role later transformed into legend. But perhaps the question is not whether Joan was real. Perhaps the question is why this story survived, why people continued telling it for centuries despite prohibitions and persecutions. Because this story is about something bigger than one woman. It is about how power fears what it cannot control, about how intellect has no gender, about how a system that excludes half of humanity is doomed to make mistakes. Today, in the 21st century, the Catholic Church still does not allow women to become priests. The argument is simple. Jesus chose 12 apostles, and all were men. Women can serve, teach, run charities, but they cannot conduct Mass, cannot hear confession, cannot become bishops or cardinals, and of course will never become pope, at least not officially. The story of Pope Joan has inspired women for 8 centuries. She became a symbol of the fight for the right to knowledge, for the right to be heard, for the right to control your own destiny. Whether she truly existed or was fiction no longer matters. She lives in every woman who refuses to accept limitations, who learns where she is told to be silent, who leads others when she is told to follow. So what do you think? Was Pope Joan a real historical person, or is this a medieval legend? Did a 9th century woman have enough courage and intellect to fool the entire Catholic Church? Or has the Vatican been hiding the truth for 800 years? Write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel because history hides many more secrets that textbooks stay silent about. Sometimes the most dangerous truth is the one they try to forget.